Today, we're going to talk about a really uncomfortable truth in marketing, why you are probably A/B testing the wrong thing.
So let me just start with this. This isn't just a bold claim. It's a diagnosis of a huge systemic problem. You see, so many of us treat split testing like it's a volume game, right? Just run endless tests and hope for a small win. But all that activity, all that data, it just creates this illusion of progress while hiding what's really driving conversion.
And this really gets to the heart of it. The problem isn't the tools we use or the data we collect. The real failure, it's in our hypotheses. We're all busy meticulously optimizing these surface-level cosmetic details, button colors, fonts, all that stuff. But the real wins, the huge breakthroughs, they're way deeper. They're in the fundamental psychology of why people make decisions.
And look, the scale of this missed opportunity is just staggering. We are not talking about small incremental gains here, not at all. We've seen that tests targeting the core value proposition, or users' sense of risk, well, they can have 10, 50, even 100 times the impact of those little aesthetic tweaks. This isn't just a small change in strategy. It's a completely different game. The stakes are just incredibly high.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the optimization paradox and the crisis of incrementalism to see what's broken. Then we'll get into the solution, the MVP testing loop. We'll look at the psychology behind it, map out the path to mastery, and wrap it all up with the core insight. So let's dive into section 1, the optimization paradox. And the subtitle really says it all, why rigorous testing of trivial changes leads to failure. So let's dig into that. How can something that feels so productive, so data-driven, actually lead to, strategic failure?
This illusion of progress? It's really seductive, isn't it? Modern testing platforms make it so easy to change a button color or tweak a headline. And because it's so easy, we get this constant stream of data. It feels scientific, it looks great on a weekly report. Hey, we got a 1.2% lift here. But really, it's just busy work. It's optimization theater. And it's hiding the real problem. We're completely ignoring the big structural things that tap into a user's core motivations and fears.
So this brings us to the one crucial question you have to ask yourself. When someone lands on your page and doesn't convert, is it really because the button was the wrong shade of blue? Or is it because your whole hypothesis about what they want, what they fear, and what they value was just plain wrong? All the evidence points to the second one. The failure isn't in the design. It's in the depth of the question we're asking.
So how did we even get here? How did this culture of just testing trivial stuff become the default industry standard? To get that, we got to look back a little bit.
Okay, so think back to the late 2000s. Suddenly, A/B testing tools were everywhere. They were cheap, they were easy to use, and that was great. But it had this huge unintended side effect. The barrier to testing fell to basically zero, but the barrier to strategic thinking didn't budge. So what happened? In the early 2010s, we got this massive flood of really poorly thought out tests. And that brings us to today, where we're spending a ton of money and effort for these tiny marginal gains. We got really busy, but we didn't get productive. Now, this crisis, plus the fact that ads were getting more and more expensive, it forced people to wake up. Companies realized they just couldn't afford to waste time and money on these tiny little optimizations. The game had to change. And the shift was profound. It was a move away from testing what is, like, changing one word in a headline, to testing what could be. We're talking about changing the entire offer, the risk profile, the core value prop itself. This is where optimization stops being a tactic and starts becoming a true revenue science.
Okay, so if the old way of incremental testing is broken, what's the fix? How do we move from just random activity to a structured, powerful process? Well, that brings us to our next section, the MVP testing loop. This is the engine for high-leverage testing.
First things first, and this is super important. When I say MVP, I am not talking about a minimum viable product, no. In this context, MVP stands for motivation, value, and pain. See, a high-leverage test doesn't start with a design idea. It starts with a bet on human behavior, rooted in one of those three things. You stop asking, hey, will a green button work better? And you start asking questions like, if we really emphasize our money-back guarantee, will we address the user's pain of risk and boost conversion because they're afraid of making a mistake? It's a totally different way of thinking.
And this loop, this is the engine that drives everything. It's a simple four-step process. 1, you start with your hypothesis, your strategic bet on psychology. 2, you run the test, a focused experiment on something structural, like the guarantee. 3, and this is maybe the most important step, you analyze. You don't just look at the final conversion number. You're looking for the why. Did the guarantee actually do what you hypothesized it would? And finally, step 4, you scale. You take the knowledge you just gained and you apply it everywhere. That's how one insight turns into a massive, system-wide lift.
So why does this MVP system even work? Well, it's because it's all built on a deep understanding of human psychology. Which brings us to our next section, psychology, the real levers that drive conversion. Forget design for a second. We're talking about decoding the user's mindset.
First up is a big one, loss aversion. This is a Nobel Prize-winning idea, and it's pretty simple. It basically says that we humans are about twice as motivated to avoid a loss as we are to get an equivalent gain. Think about that. For marketing, that's a game changer. It means that anything you can do to remove perceived risk, strong guarantees, easy returns, data security, is an incredibly powerful thing to test. If you can reduce a user's fear of making a mistake, you're going to blow any cosmetic change out of the water.
Okay, the second major lever is something called cognitive fluency. Basically, our brains are wired to be efficient. They're lazy. They want to save energy. So when we scan a web page, we're automatically drawn to things that are simple and easy to process. If your page is a wall of text with a bunch of industry jargon, it's cognitively expensive. It takes too much mental work. So a really high-leverage test is one that makes your value proposition crystal clear instantly. You're reducing the effort it takes for someone to understand, what is this and why should I care? Clarity is conversion.
Okay, so we get the psychology. Now let's get practical. How do we actually do this? This is our path to mastery, where we take this theory and turn it into a real framework. This is how you transform your testing team from a tactical function into a strategic research division for your company.
And the path to mastery really starts with understanding this difference right here. On the left, you've got the enemy, low leverage, cosmetic tests, button colors, font sizes, image placement. This is the stuff that keeps you stuck in incrementalism. And on the right, that's the solution. High leverage structural tests. We're talking about your pricing model, your risk guarantees, your core value proposition. This is where real explosive growth comes from.
So, how do you master this? It boils down to 4 guiding principles. Number 1, always prioritize your MVP hypothesis. Your test should focus on pain, value, or motivation. Second, design your test specifically to quantify how well you're reducing risk. Third, focus on big, structural changes, not the cosmetic stuff. And finally, number 4, measure what you've learned, not just the lift on a single page. The goal is transferable knowledge.
And that brings us to the ultimate question, the real litmus test for your entire testing program. You have to ask, is every single test we run generating a real, actionable insight about how our customer thinks? Is that insight transferable? If the answer is no, then you're probably still stuck in that optimization paradox.
All right, let's wrap this all up and get to the single biggest takeaway. This is the core insight of the whole system, fusing data with humanity. Look, when you boil it all down, it comes to this. Real success isn't just buried in the data. It's about applying science to human psychology. The reason this MVP system works so well is because it targets 2 fundamental human drives, our need to avoid risk and our need to conserve mental energy. When you point all of your testing firepower at those 2 things, you stop wasting your time and you start creating real, predictable change.
And really, that's the final thought here. The best marketing isn't about pushing people through a funnel with tricks and hacks. It's about pulling them toward value. And how do you do that? By understanding and eliminating their 2 biggest fears, the fear of making a mistake and the fear of wasting their energy. Get that right, and you've won.